Making the headlines this evening with the ITV News.
On the eve of a historic second Trump presidency, a ceasefire in Gaza and freedom at last for at least a few of the hostages held by Hamas. 3 women were the first to be returned home to Israel, among them British-Israeli citizen Emily Damari. There was raw relief as families were reunited after 471 desperate days spent apart.
After so much pain, destruction, loss of life, today the guns in Gaza have gone silent.
In Gaza itself, refugees were returning to neighborhoods reduced to rubble. A delay to the truce this morning left another 14 people dead as the Israelis continued their onslaught. And Trump too, celebrations and a victory rally ahead of his inauguration here tomorrow in an Arctic Washington. But what will this sequel mean for America and the world?
This is ITV News with Tom Bradby in Washington.
Good evening from a very snowy Washington, where the temperature is plummeting almost as fast as morale amongst Mr. Trump's opponents. For his supporters, though, Trump, the sequel, is shaping up to be a very different prospect, where he is all-powerful and many things seem possible. Even before taking office, Mr. Trump has already taken credit for the historic ceasefire deal, which today brought an end, for now, to the Israel-Gaza war. There were extraordinary scenes as the first 3 hostages were released and reunited with their families, 15 long months after they were kidnapped by Hamas. Among them, Emily Damari, a 28-year-old British-Israeli citizen. The first phase of the truce will also see 90 Palestinian prisoners released. Our senior international correspondent, John Irvine, has our first report tonight from Israel on a day of high emotion.
So tall. A British and Israeli citizen, Emily Damari is also one of the great survivors. Here she was reunited with her siblings. In the space of just a few hours, the 3 women swapped the clutches of Hamas for the embrace of family. As their journey out of Gaza began, Hamas gave the women bags containing mementos, like they'd been guests. Then they were driven to their rendezvous with go-betweens from the Red Cross. Hamas insisted on staging formalities, some sort of attempt to legitimize their cruelty, before the 3 hostages were allowed to skip from a Hamas vehicle into a Red Cross 4x4. Then they were driven out of Gaza and handed over to the Israeli army. This was the moment that 3 bargaining chips became human beings again, no longer just smiling faces in old photos, but living, breathing people who, having been stalked by death for so long, stepped out of the depths of despair to rejoin the ranks of the free. These were the scenes outside the hospital where they will spend their first night of freedom. The former hostages are Emily Damari, aged 28, who was kidnapped from her kibbutz home. Doron Steinbrecher, a 31-year-old veterinary nurse taken from the same kibbutz, and Romy Gonen, aged 24, kidnapped as she tried to flee the Nova Music Festival. This was the scene in Miss Gonen's home as relatives watched the coverage with bated breath. And this is a smiling Emily Damari, pictured just after being reunited with her mother. Her ordeal cost her at least 2 fingers, but her resilience was also on show here.
The ceasefire has gone into effect in Gaza, and today we're seeing hostages being released. 3 Israeli women held against their will in the dark tunnels for 470 days.
In return for the hostages, the first Palestinian prisoners are expected to be released from an Israeli jail on the West Bank. 69 women and 21 children, most of them interned without trial, are expected to walk free. Tearful reunions will be happening on both sides of the divide. After all the delays and uncertainty, tonight the ceasefire is holding and delivering. John Irvine, ITV News, Tel Aviv.
The 15-month war between Israel and Hamas has claimed the lives of more than 46,000 Palestinians, according to health officials in Gaza. And today, another 14 lives were added to that dreadful toll. Israel used a delay to the ceasefire taking effect to continue its aerial bombardment. Palestinians have started to return to what's left of their devastated neighbourhoods as hundreds of aid trucks began making their way in. Our correspondent Rachel Younger reports on how the day unfolded in Gaza itself, and do please be warned, her report does have images you may find distressing.
It's 8:30 in the morning, the allotted hour for the guns to fall silent and the bombing of Gaza to stop. But the smoke on the skyline tells its own grim story. Never mind asking if the ceasefire will hold. For a few agonising hours, it seems like it won't even begin. Imagine the agony of surviving almost 500 days of relentless attack and letting down your defences, only to be injured in this moment of limbo. The Hamas-run health ministry says 14 people are killed by Israeli forces as the truce hangs in the balance. But they're done with waiting for life to restart here, and families displaced again and again by Israel's evacuation orders are already making their way back home. Only there isn't much left. This is what we have to go back to, says Ala Abu Mazen. But inside is even worse. We don't have anything, she's saying, when... Do you hear the shelling, she asks. They can't be trusted. But it doesn't stop the celebrations beginning regardless. Hamas fighters are being cheered through the streets, even as the Israeli authorities are blaming them for delaying the ceasefire by failing to name the hostages about to be freed. Finally, at 11:15, the truce begins. By now, Palestinians are able to reach parts of northern Gaza that haven't been filmed for months, and there are no words to describe the damage. Just how little is left of Gaza is only too visible. We can't get any closer because the Israelis still won't let international journalists in. Nor is there any agreement as to who will now run it. The Palestinian Authority, which controls parts of the occupied West Bank, has said it is ready, but that's not what the Israelis want. And that's just one of the factors that makes this truce so fragile. But there's a strength inside Gaza, showing itself again and again as the day unfolds. My feelings are of great happiness. This is a dream coming true, he says. We have died a million times. Today, it feels like life is restarting. Aid is rolling in, the sky's finally free from missiles. Fleeting, maybe, but a moment's peace at last. Rachel Younger, ITV News, Southern Israel.
Well, John Irvine joins us from Tel Aviv tonight, and our US correspondent Robert Moore is right here with me in the studio, as you can see. John, I guess one obvious question above all, will this ceasefire hold?
Good evening, Tom. I would put the chances at 50-50. Certainly Hamas want it to hold because a resumption of the war would only worsen their situation. But the Prime Minister here, Mr. Netanyahu, has been portraying this ceasefire as very probably temporary. And one reason for that is that he's had two ultra-right-wing parties in his coalition with the clout to topple his government. One quit tonight. The second is threatening to do the same thing at the end of the first phase in 42 days' time if the war does not resume then.
Having said that, Tom, there are a couple of forces that might pressurise Mr. Netanyahu into actually solidifying the ceasefire. The first is the people of Israel. Polls show more than 70% of them support this deal and want all the hostages home. The second is the Trump administration. Donald Trump got this deal over the line, warning there would be hell to pay if agreement wasn't reached before tomorrow. If from now on he says there will be a hell to pay if the war resumes, Mr. Netanyahu will have to listen. For the time being, the truce is holding and a bloody limbo is over. Tom, it's a case of so far, so good.
OK, John, thank you very much. Well, maybe I can put that to you, Robert. John obviously saying there that still a lot to be worked out, but Donald Trump has made it very clear what he wants. What happens next, do you think?
Well, I think Trump is claiming all the credit for this. We know that he is withering about the Biden policy on this, but this is a glimpse into how sort of Trump's transactional foreign policy may look going forward. Tough, but overwhelming support for Israel. And I think, I'm sensing here a domestic context to all of this as well. We're not 2017, as we've discussed, Tom, seemed like something of an aberration, but this feels much more like a realignment. Politically, obviously, Republicans control not just the White House, but the Senate and the House. Economically, we're going to see tariffs imposed around the world. Culturally, it feels like an assault on sort of what they and Trump has derisively called America's woke agenda. And much of this is going to be seen tomorrow because Trump is surrounding himself with sort of populists and nationalists from around the world. So I think in foreign policy terms, particularly as it pertains to this ceasefire deal, we're going to see America, Trump's America now, flexing its muscles going forward. OK, well, I'd love to come back to you in just a few minutes about what the first few days of a Trump presidency is really going to be like. But another war Mr. Trump has claimed he will end, and end quickly, is that in Ukraine. He boasted he'd do it in just 24 hours, and that's just one of the big looming questions, as Robert was saying, over what a second Trump presidency means for the world. And our international editor, Emma Murphy, is in Kyiv tonight. Emma, so much on the line, really, for all the people of Ukraine. What's the mood there ahead of this new presidency?
Well, I think there's great interest in what a Donald Trump presidency is going to do for this country and for the war that's been waged here for 3 years. And people have certainly been watching the situation in Gaza with a great deal of interest. And I think also a hope that what galvanised that situation could galvanise this and move this country and Russia towards something of a ceasefire. However fragile that situation is in Gaza, at least it is the possibility of some peace. And at the moment, there is no possibility of peace here. It really has been quite a stalemate over the past months, but with Russia taking territory, and as long as they are taking territory, it is going to be incredibly difficult for Ukraine to get any progress in this war. And so they are hoping that the tipping of the balance will be Donald Trump. Of course, he said he would bring this war to an end on the first day. There's no sign of that. But I think buoyed up by what's happened in Gaza, he will be trying to get some kind of cessation of hostilities as quickly as possible. His special envoy to Ukraine, Mr. Kellogg, a 3-star retired general, has said that he wants to see it done within 100 days. And I think that seems significantly more realistic. In terms of how President Trump might get these people around the table, well, he had talks with President Zelensky in December in Paris. He's already said to be scheduling talks with President Putin in the coming weeks. I think his message will be to Zelensky that basically, if you don't start talking, we're going to start withdrawing aid. And the warning to President Putin will be, you've seen nothing yet if you think that America is going to stop its support, and they will simply increase the support to get Russia around that table.
OK, Emma, thank you very much indeed. Well, before he takes his oath for the second time, the president-elect is holding a rally tonight here in Washington in front of an adoring crowd of supporters. Thousands waited for hours in the cold and the rain to attend his victory celebrations. Earlier, he laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier at Arlington National Cemetery. Our US correspondent Dan Rivers now on Donald Trump's return.
Donald Trump chose to start his triumphant return to Washington at one of his own golf courses outside the Capitol. With his wife Melania at his side, this was a moment of reflection at his historic electoral comeback. She's about to become the First Lady once again, and he, the 47th President. This morning, their ceremonial duties were already underway before he'd even assumed office, laying a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknowns in the hallowed ground of Arlington National Cemetery, accompanied by combat veterans. In the capital, workers have been scrambling to build an alternative stage inside. It is here, under the rotunda, that Donald Trump will now take the oath of office rather than braving the Arctic temperatures outside. It's left this venue, facing the National Mall, curiously devoid of any activity.
I'll get one of your buttons.
Sure. Tonight, all focus is on this entertainment arena, where Donald Trump will give a victory speech to the party faithful, some of whom have been lining up since before dawn.
To me, this is bigger than a Taylor Swift concert. The Rolling Stones, the Olympics, the World Cup, all put together.
This is an amazing experience to be at a presidential, victory rally and inauguration tomorrow. It's going to be a great weekend.
He's like P.T. Barnum. He's a genius. He's a celebrity. He's a businessman. He's a politician. He's the trifecta. He's everything.
We gotta act quick, shut our borders down. Joe Biden does, the media embraces.
Inside, the curious melding of entertainment and political messaging, which has helped propel Donald Trump back to power. America is standing on the precipice of a new era. Donald Trump is vowing to sign up to 100 executive orders tomorrow, aggressively pushing forward with his agenda, which some here are framing as presidential shock and awe. Dan Rivers, ITV News, Washington.
And Robert joins me for a final thought before tomorrow. We've been promised shock and awe. What's it going to look like?
I think shock and awe is probably exactly right, as Dan said there. These executive orders that he will sign tomorrow are going to set the agenda. He's going to increase massively power to law enforcement to deport illegal migrants. That will outrage many human rights activists. He will impose tariffs. That will outrage free traders. He will free or at least pardon or commute the sentences of those January the 6th insurrectionists. That will outrage constitutionalists. And he's going to order a massive expansion of oil drilling. It goes without saying that will outrage environmentalists. So this is Donald Trump tomorrow going to feel emboldened and strengthened. And remember, this time around, he doesn't face the electorate again. All of that sort of legal nightmare, that quagmire is in the rearview mirror, and he feels particularly sort of emboldened by winning the popular vote, which he didn't do, obviously, in 2017. So for better or for worse, Tom, I think the coming 4 years are going to be Trump unleashed.
OK, Robert, for now, we will be here tomorrow. But for now, thank you very much indeed. And that is just about it from us tonight on the cusp of the second Trump presidency, as America and indeed the world holds its breath and wonders with a mixture of hope and perhaps fear what will happen next. Right now, the president-elect is doing what he arguably does best. There he is, speaking and entertaining his supporters in one final campaign-style rally. His first term in office was tumultuous, to say the very least. His time out of office, no less so. Found guilty of 34 felony counts of falsifying business records, he then survived not one, but 2 assassination attempts. He is the man who has defied political gravity. Whatever you think of him, we can pretty much all agree on that. What would sink most politicians only seemed to make him stronger. And now, after winning the popular vote, he returns to the White House, no doubt more buoyed and more determined to do what he vowed to do the last time and make America great again. The rest of the world can only hold its breath. Now, tomorrow, we will be here, right here in the studio, so please do join me and Robert and Heather, who used to work in the last Trump administration, for a special programme from 4 o'clock. That's tomorrow afternoon. It's meant to be -12, so you can watch us freeze live on air. That'll be entertaining, if nothing else. We will be here watching President Trump, the inauguration, on ITV1, ITVX and STV. Until then, thank you very much indeed for watching, and good night.
Believe me, you don't want to leave Angelica on her own.